Hi, ladies and gentlemen. This is Steve Harney, the founder of Keeping Current Matters. Welcome to today's edition of the Deep Dive. We're going to talk about some interesting things today. We're going to talk about Airbnbs and what opportunity there are for listings at Airbnbs, and also the whole investor situation and where there are listing opportunities with investors right now. To begin with, I'd just like to say I sometimes spend most of the summers at the lake. We have a lake house, a family lake house. And fishermen fish right along the shore of our land. And sometimes I'll go down and say, hey, listen, how are the fish biting, and whatever the case may be. And one day I asked one of the fishermen, what's the best way to fish at the lake? And he had a pretty interesting answer. He goes, if you can figure out where the fish are, go there. All right. And I kind of giggled and he kind of giggled. But ladies and gentlemen, that's what today's deep dive is really about. He inspired it. Because right now, instead of doing our normal stuff, I want to try to figure out where the fish are. And I think there's two categories of listings we can go after right now. We're going to have to learn how to do it a little bit. It's going to take a little bit of time to get it down right. But I think it's going to be an opportunity that's going to be available to us in a big way right now and continue to be available to us going forward. So let's get started with the presentation itself. All right. It's Airbnbs and landlords. Where are the listing opportunities? All right, as we always say, most agents know what's happening. Good agents understand what's happening. Great agents can explain what's happening. And that's important, especially on this particular issue, all right, because what winds up taking place is the fact that there's been a lot of talk about both of these issues, and there's a lot of myths about both of these issues. So if we know exactly what's taking place and we can explain it to ourselves, probably more than anybody else, I think we can go in a big way here. So let's start with Airbnbs. There has been a lot of talk, ladies and gentlemen, about the fact that Airbnbs will crash the housing market. Back in, I think it was April, somebody put out a tweet that became viral and it got into the news, and CNBC was actually interviewing people on it, that the Airbnb situation was so dire that there was going to be this flood of Airbnb and Vrbo houses coming to the market. Well, obviously, the person who originally did the tweet didn't really do their homework. They didn't understand the data they were talking to. And obviously, that didn't happen, that there was this mass exodus of people from their Airbnbs and throwing them on the market. But whenever something like that happens, there's always a little bit of truth in it. And what the challenge is sometimes the pendulum, which swung way too far to, there's going to be this mass exodus of people from their Airbnb homes. That wasn't true. But it's also not true that there's not an opportunity there. So let's talk about that a little bit, but let's first realize what that means to us. Realtor.com and Census-wide just did a short-term rental survey. And what they found out in that survey is 59.8% of people about to sell their house would consider renting out their current house rather than selling it if they were to buy or rent another home in the future. Meaning that people that are thinking about going out and changing where they live, whether they take a rental or buy a new home, their existing home, 59.8% said they would consider putting it on the market as a rental. Approximately 20% said it would be great to have extra income from a renter, and approximately 18% said the idea of owning a rental investment property appeals to them. Now, I want you to understand that those are pretty big numbers. Even the 18% is a big number. So there are people out there right now thinking about selling their house, but not thinking about listing their house. And we have to understand that that's taking place, and where did it go? What happens to that? So let's take a look at Airbnbs. As long as Airbnb has been around, critics and affordable housing advocates have called for legislation that curtails the company's impact on the real estate market. Over the last year, those advocates have finally started getting their wish. Now, there are some studies that show that if there are Airbnbs, more Airbnbs in the marketplace, two things happen. Number one, rents go up. All right. And number two, what winds up taking place is the prices of homes go up. So because we're in such an affordability crunch with either renters or home buyers, this is becoming a real acute issue with those that are in the affordable housing or advocates for affordable housing. So they've been putting a tremendous amount of pressure on local governments to do something about the Airbnb situation. And it's, as it says here, it's starting to take place. For example, this just broke, and I have it in a little red box, just last week. Has Airbnb overstayed its welcome? Some cities say yes. In the on September 14th, in just hold on 1 second, Kansas City, I couldn't see it up there. Kansas City will kick hundreds of rentals off Airbnb and Vrbo next week. And that was on September 14th, meaning that's already happening. Kansas City is throwing a bunch of houses off of Airbnb and Vrbo. They're not allowing people to rent their houses out that way. And probably the biggest thing is Airbnb's New York City listings fell 77% because what they came out with a new rule, New York State Local Law 18, which says there puts all sorts of restrictions on what you can do as far as renting your home out. So if we're talking about, well, what impact does that have? We can see here that in New York City, which we have the numbers for, the number of short-term rental listings in New York City went from 22,500 just a couple of months ago, that right after this law took place, it dropped down to 4,600. So the difference between that 17,000, the difference, those are people that had their house rented as short-term rental listings, and now New York City is saying you can't do that. And again, this is happening across the country in many, many cities. So what I want you to do, if you're thinking about getting listings, make sure you're contacting the people that own the Airbnbs in your marketplace, and make sure you understand what your local governments are doing, what your local municipalities are doing. Now, I'm not saying every one of these houses are going to come into the market. Most of what the new restrictions are across the country are you can't rent it out for less than a month. So these people are turning them into either monthly rentals or they're turning them into yearly rentals, normal 1-year lease. But understand that the people that had these homes were renting them out per day and making a small fortune. So if they were basing their ability to own that house on the income they were getting from short-term rentals, and now they're forced into a more normal rental market, they might no longer have the income to hold that house. And we also have to remember, in some of the areas where people during the pandemic, they wanted to get out of the cities and they bought bigger houses on bigger pieces of property. They could work from home. And now more and more companies are asking you to come back into the office. They can't make that commute back and forth, at least not every day. So what a lot of those people who bought the bigger houses, instead of selling them, they said, you know what, I'll make some money. Let's turn it into an Airbnb. Well, now the rules might have changed. And ladies and gentlemen, I will also want you to understand that whether you're running an Airbnb or whether you have an investment home, it could be a little bit nutty as far as it sounds great to own an investment property. It sounds great that I'm going to make extra money, but you also have to deal with the headaches of owning an investment property, especially if somebody else is living in it. You're getting a call at 3 o'clock in the morning. Now, the experienced investors, the experienced Airbnb guys, they already have like their property management people. But I'm talking about the one-offs, the people who did buy that house a couple of years ago. They don't have a property manager. They're taking the calls themselves and having to find now a handyman, and a very difficult time to find a handyman to fix the problems that the house has. I think that the headaches that these are putting on people that didn't decide to go into the business, but because of the situations decided to jump into the business, it wasn't by plan, it was, kind of just happened. I think some of these people might be ready to go ahead and list the property. So let's stay on top of that. With nightly Airbnbs now illegal, stays in its homes for fewer than 30 days. This is in New York City. Home rental options for 30 and 60-day stays may become more limited as many property owners convert their Airbnb listings to traditional long-term leases. Again, that's what I just said. What winds up taking place is I don't know that these people are going to sell their house. They might turn them into longer-term leases, or they might turn them into monthly leases. But in either case, that wasn't their original plan. Even the people who might have 2 or 3 Airbnbs, that wasn't their plan either. And they're not going to get the same type of rental income on an annual than they would if they were able to Airbnb it. So, ladies and gentlemen, I really do believe there's a tremendous opportunity right now for people, because governments are taking major steps to curtail what Airbnbs can do. There might be some people right now that are ready to make the move. All right, they're ready to say, all right, let me get this house on the market, let me get it sold. I made a lot of money over the last couple of years, which we'll get to in a second, and this might be a time to do it. Please call the people of Airbnbs in your market, and at least, if nothing else, offer them a free market analysis, or better yet, the amount of equity in their home. Offer them what we call here at KCM the PAIR, the Professional Equity Assessment Report. Let them know. Don't talk to them about selling a house. You're going to scare them, but let them know that you can give them exactly what the equity in their house is. Because if they're thinking about selling, what do they want to know? How much they can get. All right. So let's find those people and go from there. Now, in different parts of the country, fewer, but in different parts, there's the flip side of this issue. For example, in 2016, the state of Arizona passed a law that bans all of its city and towns from capping the number of short-term rentals. At the start of 2023, Phoenix had over 20,000 short-term rental units, and all that competition has led to many of them sitting empty for weeks at a time. And this is what we're hearing from the advocates, the affordable housing advocates. Listen, there are houses sitting empty. People are not making money on that, and there are other people that can't afford to buy a house. So here we have both ends of the spectrum. Cities cutting back on what you can do with your Airbnb, and that might necessitate a move on your part from a financial standpoint, or they let it be free reign like the Wild Wild West, and all of a sudden there are so many short-term rentals in your marketplace, you can't make any money on it. And again, ladies and gentlemen, I think these are tremendous, tremendous opportunities. So the myth that there's so many coming to the market is going to crash the market, that myth's already been disproven. But I don't want the baby thrown out with the bathwater. What is happening is some people are going to have to make a decision. And we should be in front of those people and get those listings. All right, next myth. Wall Street is buying every home in America. And this has been a myth for a couple of years. And it's really picked up steam right now because of the short-term rental situation and everything else. Ladies and gentlemen, this has been a myth since the day they first said it. This has not changed. It's just not true. Wall Street is not buying every home in America. The biggest challenge that people have, and I know the Wall Street Journal itself had a big article on this a couple of years back. What people don't understand is how to define what an investor is. So they think that an investor, anyone who's an investor, is somehow connected to some sort of hedge fund management. So if I own, like I mentioned, my lake house, well, technically that's an investment property, but I'm not Wall Street. I'm a mom and pop. My wife and I bought a house on the lake so the family can come and visit during the summer. But they don't know how to distinguish that from everything else. At least they haven't been able to. Now, why is this important to us? Well, more and more people now are going to go ahead and try to decide whether, instead of, which we mentioned before, instead of selling their house, they might decide to rent it. As a matter of fact, if we take a look at single-family landlords, John Bird's Consulting just came out with a study that shows that 7% of potential sellers now, they're saying that 7% are going to rent a house instead of sell it when they decide to move. 7% is a pretty big number. And if we take a look at it, they break it down by region. If you're in Southern California, 11% of the people are saying, well, I'd rather, more than 1 out of 10 are saying, you know what? I think I'd rather rent my house out and keep it and then move into the next house and just keep the rental. Now, again, that's going to cut into the number of listings what we normally would get when people are moving. But also remember, these are people, most of whom have never done a rental before. They don't know what it's like to own a house and rent it out and take the responsibility of what that means. If something happens, there's a hole in the roof, they have to fix it. And believe me, that tenant's calling them every day, when you're going to fix the hole in the roof, when you're going to fix the hole in the roof. And we all know that right now finding people that can do that kind of work, it's really, really tough right now. So they're going to keep on getting those calls. The bathroom's clogged up. We can't unclog it. What do we do? That's a 3 o'clock call to a landlord who now has to find a plumber to get over there and try to see what he can do with the toilet. People want to be landlords. They just don't want to take on the responsibility of that. But they don't realize the responsibility as much. So that's what's taking place. But I don't want you thinking that everyone that is selling a house is, somehow the Wall Street, a Wall Street hedge fund manager. Here's the actual breakdown of total purchases by the size of the investor going through 2023, going through the second quarter of 2023. iBuyers are buying very, very few homes right now. Most of the iBuyers decided they didn't want to buy any homes. People that own, or the big Wall Street firms that own over 1,000 properties, they're buying some, but not the vast majority. That's not the big investor. The people who own between 100 and 1,000 homes, that's a little less than 5,000. The people who own between 10 and 99 homes, that could be 11, 12, 13 homes. That's like the mom and pop investor that has really decided to make this a career. They bought 16,928. But the vast majority of homes that are purchased so far this year by investors are by mom and pops, people like you and I, that decided to buy the house around the corner, or decided to buy the house around the corner, and then there was a fix-up house 3 blocks over, and they decided to buy that house too. And all of a sudden they built their portfolio to a couple of homes. From a percentage basis, we can see that really, when we take a look at all of the houses that sell, those first 4 categories, you have very little, less than 5%. But the mom and pop investor has 19.6% of that market. That's important that we know that, ladies and gentlemen, right? And we must realize that a lot of those people right now are thinking about, now these are people just bought in the last year, I'm not talking about them, but I'm talking about the 20-something% of the people that own houses as investments in this country. And there's an argument that somewhere between 24 and 30% of all the homes are owned by mom and pops in this country, that they have a decision to make right now. Because they have run a couple of years. First of all, from a rental standpoint, rents have gone up dramatically over the last 30 years, dramatically. So every year, if they wanted to, they could just tack up a little bit more on the rent and get further ahead of the mortgage payment. Some of these people, they refinance the house every 10 years and take that cash out. The reason they can refinance it every 10 years is every year they raise the rent a little bit. They've had a really great run just from a rental standpoint. The other thing they've had a run from is an equity standpoint, but let's go to the rental standpoint first. Right now, apartment construction is roaring along at a 40-year high. That means more choices for renters, likely at lower rents, as everyone jockeys for tenants. So that 30-year run that mom and pop investor had is coming to an end. They're not going to be able to tack on extra rent. If anything, they might have vacancies. And that's just they'll be able to afford the vacancies if they've owned the house for 10, 15, 20, 30 years. They'll be able to figure that piece of it out, but they're not going to be comfortable with it. Some of those people right now, and this is the term I want you to do, I want you to use the term, they're going to be liquidating part of their portfolio. Remember, whether they own 1 investment home, 10 investment homes, or 1,000 investment homes, people see themselves as an investor. You should talk to them as though you respect them as an investor. So even if it's a mom and pop that owns 3 houses and they decided to sell them, you should be talking to them in the terms of, oh, you've decided to liquidate part of your portfolio or diversify part of your portfolio. And right now, some of the people that own 3 or 4 houses, they might decide to sell them and buy a little office building on Main Street. Because a little office building on Main Street all of a sudden has a real good price on it. So they could be diversifying, their portfolio as far as investment in real estate. Because, ladies and gentlemen, the rental market is softening so fast in some pockets of the country then landlords have no choice but to offer concessions. All right. So what we're talking, that's from Fortune magazine. So what we're seeing here, and it's important that we realize it, that the rental situation, now this is showing apartments, but remember, all across the whole board, even single family rentals, there's more and more of them being built. Because there's more and more of them being built, there's less and less chance that you're going to make a killing on rentals if you're a landlord. There's just too much competition. And what I'm suggesting to everybody on this call is that you go ahead and you talk to these people, have conversations with them, have a conversation with every single person that owns an Airbnb in your marketplace. First, find out in your marketplace what the changes, if any, have been taking place. Have a conversation with every Verbo owner in your marketplace. And the great news with that is you can find them on the internet very easily because they advertise who they are. Reach out to those people in whichever way you normally do. Some of you are going to be doing emails, some of you are going to be doing calls, some of you are going to be doing some sort of door knocking. Is not going to really work on a Airbnb or FSBO, all right? But even an investor, all right? But you want to go ahead and get that information out, all right? That's important. Make sure that you understand if you're going to deal with investors, even the Airbnb people, because they are investors, that you know how to get that information, either through some source that you use, your title company, some other company that's giving you their home address, all right, or whether you're using the tax records. Because the way they count investors, ladies and gentlemen, is simple. If the tax bill is not being sent to the house, that means it's being sent to some other house. And normally the owner of the house that you're looking at, that the tax bill is not being sent there, that tax bill is being sent to another house. Where that tax bill is being sent, that's where the owner of the Airbnb lives. So let's get that information out to them. Let's do everything we possibly can to let these people know this is a growing opportunity that's going to continue to grow, not just through this period right now while we're waiting for mortgage rates to adjust, but for a long period of time now, this is going to change. Because we're not going to see the type of appreciation, and that's what I want to talk about here too. One of the reasons these people are thinking about maybe liquidating some of their properties is they've had a great run, not only on rents, they've had a great run at equity. If we take a look at what how much prices have changed over the last 5 years, we break it down here for every state. But as a nation, they're up 57%. In 5 years, their $400,000 house is now worth $600,000. They're sitting on at least $200,000 in equity. Ladies and gentlemen, I don't know if everybody knows that. I know that I talk to agents, and when I talk to agents about how much equity is available in the country right now, they don't even realize it. They're shocked. So I think the homeowner is also. It's important that we do that. They're sitting on tremendous equity, and what's going to happen? They're used to that 10 or 5, 8, 10, 15, the last couple of years, 20% equity increases. Well, that's not going to happen going forward. We looked very closely at the Home Price Expectation Survey, which is a nationwide panel of over 100 economists, real estate experts, and investment and market strategists. And once a quarter, Pulsenomics, once a quarter turns around and they survey these over 100 experts. And they say, where do you think prices are going to go over the next 5 years? Ladies and gentlemen, they're not talking about 5, 8, 10%, 15%, 20% increases in prices. They're talking about back to normal appreciation. Now, again, this is normal appreciation. It's great for the housing market. If wages will be able to catch up and when mortgage rates do moderate, things will be much better. This is great for the housing market. It might not be great for the investor, especially an investor who's used to getting much higher returns on that investment. If they're looking at these returns, they could put it into a 10-year treasury and get better money than this. And remember, some of those investors are beginning to realize that. They could liquidate the home and put it into investment with less concern, and over the next couple of years, they could be making more money. That's our job right now. There's a new opportunity available to anyone that's listening that's willing to run in it. And again, I talked about it before. Let's make sure that we're doing the professional equity assessment report. If you don't know what this is, go to the deep dive we did. You can see it on YouTube if you'd like, or see it on the page, KCM Member's page, talking about equity, because we break this whole professional equity assessment report down. I don't have the time to do it again today. But if you go back to the equity deep dive we've done, and again, you can do it on, you can look it up on YouTube, the KCM Member's YouTube channel, and it will show you exactly where you can get it and what it means. But what we're talking about right now is let's make sure that every single investor, whether they're an Airbnb type of investor or they do a yearly lease, they just own houses that they rent out every year. In either case, let's let those people know how much equity is in their house, because when they find out how much equity is in their house, this is what I think might happen. They might decide to put that house on the market, take that cash, and reinvest it in a different asset. Or enjoy their lives. Go on a vacation they always dreamed of. Or buy their retirement. Right? That's what we're talking about. And for the people that have a KCM subscription, and that gives you real talk, we believe very, very, very strongly that doing videos is a crucial piece of your marketing right now. Crucial. If you're not doing videos, you're making a mistake. Now, I don't care if you're doing the KCM videos, then just do videos. And for all the people that think that, well, I'm not sure if I'm good enough or my hair's nice enough, listen, I'm doing this and I'm on video. If I worried about, well, I'm not that good looking, I don't look like Brad Pitt, there wouldn't be a deep dive. What you want to do is get that information out. And what the team at KCM has done right now, they turned around and they said, you know what? Let's do a real talk, a minute video on homeowners with multiple homes can cash in on today's market. Pretty much a minute advertisement for you that you understand that there might be something you can help them with right now. It's a brand new video. And please, if you have a KCM subscription, please grab that video and put that everywhere you can find it. I am promising you that the business coming from Airbnbs and from single family investors is going to be a big part of business over the next 2 years. A very large percentage of the business over the next several months. You're missing out on a great opportunity if you don't take advantage of it. All right, again, we're coming down to the half hour. I just want to let you know that next week we're going to be doing, it looks a little different because we're doing it a little differently. The last of the listing, I promise you, it would be 5 weeks. We just concentrated on listings. Now we gave you over the last 4 weeks, different ways you can go after listings, different opportunities, different pieces of the puzzle that you might not have looked at before. Well, now you have to get the listings. You're going to be prospecting, you're going to be in front of those people. We're going to give you the 5 elements of the perfect listing presentation. It's something that I put together personally, and it really delves into the psychology of what you need to do at a listing presentation. Not just the CMA, not just like bragging about your company. As a matter of fact, we'll warn about bragging too much about yourself in the company. All right. But the whole trick to getting a listing is people have to trust you. And they have to trust you to do 4 things. They have to trust you enough that they're going to take probably the largest asset their family owns. All right. The largest asset their family owns. And they're going to trust you to liquidate it for them. Wow. That's a lot of trust. They're going to trust you to set the price on that asset. They have to trust you enough to set the timetable to get that asset sold. They have to trust you enough where you're turning around and you can negotiate the right fee for your services to liquidate that asset or sell that house if you're talking to a single family home or homeowner for a single home. Ladies and gentlemen, trust is the crucial piece in every listing presentation. They have to trust you tremendously. They're trusting you in some ways with their family's future. We'll teach you how to build that trust. We'll teach you how to build that rapport. We'll teach you how to get every listing you're sitting at. But that's next week. Thank you very much for attending this week. As I always say, you gave me a half hour of your life. I hope I gave you a good return on your investment. I very, very much hope so. See you next Monday, 11 o'clock Eastern, 8 a.m. on the West Coast. And you know what time it is in the middle. Bye now.